Every great build starts with a plan, and today's plan is to make a custom bathroom vanity for a refurbished modernist apartment in the city center. The client wanted something modern and functional, but also warm and inviting, something that would fit in well with the design they were going for. After some consideration, we decided to go for Niangon wood. If you have never heard of Niangon, it is a beautiful wood species from West Africa with a rich reddish tone to it, which gives it the warmth that we were looking for. It is also naturally rot resistant, which is great for a bathroom. And as a bonus, it's a joy to work with, which is always appreciated. The first issue we faced in this project was that the lumberyard didn't have Niangon boards in the thickness we needed. They were either a little too thin or way too thick. We couldn't compromise on the thickness, so that left us with some pretty chunky boards that were a bit more than twice the thickness we needed. We figured it should be fine, as we could just resaw them in the shop. Sounded like an easy idea at the time, but yeah, it wasn't. There are several ways of resawing boards, and the standard is using a bandsaw, but we did not have a bandsaw. We opted for the table saw. Now, resawing thick boards on a table saw is not without its challenges. The blade could only reach halfway through, so each board had to be cut from both sides, but cutting a full blade height at once would be pretty sketchy, and it could lead to the blade binding and giving us some kickbacks, which we would like to avoid. So instead we opted for multiple passes, slowly working through each board. First one side, then the other, raising the blade a little bit each time. It was tedious, but the result was nice. After an eternity and a half, we finally had all the boards sliced in half. The finish from the table saw wasn't too bad, but it still needed cleaning up, so we took the boards over to the jointer and then to the planer to give them all the same thickness. With the boards nice and even, the next step was arranging the panels. We debated the layout for a while, but the beauty of using resawn boards is that it's easy to match the color and grain. The edges of the boards were not bad, but far from perfect. Normally, we'd take them back to the jointer, but we're in a co-working space and the machine was busy, so rather than wait, we figured we'd go old school and we dug out a hand plane from a tool cabinet. Sam has decades of carpentry experience. After just a couple of passes, the joint was absolutely perfect. I mean, just look at this. With the edges ready, it was glue up time. We measured and marked for alignment pieces. It would probably be fine just gluing the boards together, but if they were to move during the glue up, we would need to plane them down again to make the panels level, which might leave us with too thin panels. So taking the extra time now just saves us a lot of headache down the road. Once everything was marked, we busted out the biscuit joiner. Did you think I was gonna say domino? I know, you can't really call yourself a YouTube woodworker without one, but we're not quite there yet. The biscuit joiner worked perfectly, we cut the mortises and then we moved on to the glue up. We put glue down the center of the board and spread it out from the center to the edge, just to avoid too much to clean up afterwards. Then we added the biscuits, clamped everything up and let it rest until next day. Once the glue was dry, we could clean up the edges once again. For the vertical pieces, a table saw sled worked perfectly to square them up. And then it was time for sanding. I took care of this step and sanded all the pieces, which was a huge mistake, but more on that later. Now I know what you're thinking. Watching someone's back while they sand for hours is riveting content. But since this video is already running long, we had to trim most of it. So for now, I'll just summarize. I sanded every piece with 80, 120, 150 and finally 180 grit sandpaper to get a nice smooth finish. One of the most exciting parts of every build is when you finally start putting everything together. Here, the structure is fairly simple. It's essentially a box. The bottom panel rests on steel legs, the vertical pieces sit on top of the bottom panel, and they support the top panel. Since each part is supported by the one below, We didn't need any fancy joinery, so we got the biscuit cutter back out to align everything during the glue up. After adding the biscuits, we did a dry run to test the fit. Sam tapped the sides into place, and together we lifted the top into position. In my case, this meant balancing the top in one hand and the camera in the other. Prime example of multitasking. Some gentle convincing later, we could finally stand back and get a good sense of the final dimensions. It was starting to look like a piece of furniture. Next, the center support needed a bit of trimming to fit, so we took it to the table saw, cut halfway through lengthwise. Then we switched the jigsaw for the crosscut. And we finished the cut with a pull saw. The support all ready, we could slide it into the box. Or try to. Turns out it didn't fit. Yay! We repeated the process off camera, and soon enough we were back on track. When building pieces with multiple parts, it's important to get the assembly order right. Otherwise, you might find yourself trying to attach a key piece that suddenly doesn't fit. Or so I've heard. This time though, we actually thought ahead, so we decided to do the glue up in two phases to keep it manageable. First, we attached the crosspiece to the sides, using a board with the same length as the crosspiece to keep everything nice and square. It's a simple trick, but it avoids the misalignment that can happen if you only clamp to the side being glued. Next, we attached the center support to the bottom panel. Once that was secure, we joined the sides and crosspiece to the bottom and center support. Finally, we added the top panel and clamped everything down nice and tight. Thankfully, everything went smoothly. The box came together beautifully, and with that, it was ready for finishing. When choosing a finish, it is crucial to account for the environment where the piece will live. This is to be used in a bathroom, so while it won't be submerged in water, it will have to withstand moisture from splashes at the sink and steam from the shower. We opted for a couple of coats of a varnish specifically designed for waterproofing furniture, which should be perfect for this environment. With that done, all that was left was adding a profile to the drawers, cutting them to length, and attaching the drawer hardware to the box. The client wanted finger pulls for the drawers to keep it look clean and modern. To avoid overloading the router, we first removed most of the waste material on the table saw. Then we took the front panel over to our makeshift router table to shape the finger pull profile. The profile came out pretty well, but there was a tiny lip that needed to be shaped out, which was quickly done with a block plane. And then we messed up. Do you remember earlier when I said that sanding everything was a mistake? Well, this is why. We didn't want to cut the front panel to length until the finger pull profile was done, to avoid blowout and ensure the profile was continuous across both drawers. Sounds smart, right? Well, when we glued up the panels, we marked where to cut to avoid hitting the biscuits. But as it turns out, pencil marks are no match for 4 rounds of sanding. So we had to guess, and we guessed wrong. The gnarly mess that was left was the result of trying to fix it with sawdust and glue. Turns out there's a limit to how well that trick works. But giving up was not an option, so we salvaged matching end grain from the offcuts, marked the damaged area, and carefully removed it with a chisel. There wasn't much margin for error here, as any blowout on the front of the drawer would mean we would need to start over. After a lot of tiny taps on the chisel, the replacement piece fit, so we glued it in place, gave it some good taps to seat it, and sanded the edge smooth. The repair isn't perfect, but it's miles better than the mess we started with. Thankfully, this edge will be facing the shower and won't be visible, but it certainly was a lesson learned. The drawers for this project were a prefabricated kit. While not the most exciting part of the build, it made sense for this piece. Prefabricated drawers can simplify assembly and ensure smooth operation, which is always a plus in a functional space like a bathroom. Assembly was simple. We unpacked the pieces, screwed the rails into the box, assembled the sides and hardware, clicked everything together, and slid them into place. And here's how it turned out. If you have enjoyed this video and know someone who might also like it, please consider sharing it with them. It would mean a lot. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in the next one.